Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, it's Football at 4.
And Football at 4 is brought to you by Caesars Entertainment Group of Atlantic City. Come experience the ultimate sports destinations all season long. Wild Wild West, Tropicana, Harrah's Resort, Atlantic City. Book your game day experience today at Caesars.com. Of course, Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast crew. Andrew DiCecco is here on a Thursday, the final conversation for 2021. Enjoy talking football with him year-round. Looking forward to the draft conversation. But we have a team, Andrew, that I don't know how many people at the beginning of the year thought would be a playoff caliber team, let alone be able to clinch before the season ends. But that's where we sit as the Eagles get ready to take on the Washington football team. So let's start with that. How surprising to you is it that this team has essentially turned the franchise around? It was a 4-win team that had huge question marks, and now here they are with a chance to go to the playoffs. How big of a surprise has not only this season been, but how they got to this point?
Yeah, it's very surprising. I mean, they sort of did a mid-season turnaround. It looked like they were headed for a very early draft selection, and they were able to rebound and make some different wholesale changes in key areas. And the head coach saw marked improvement and progression in his first year, and I think basically that all just culminated in a team making a late-season surge, and now they're on the doorstep of entering the playoffs.
You know, we had Sal Powell on earlier, Andrew, and he said, what impressed him the most about Sirianni was his ability to adapt, that he changed on the fly and was willing to stick with it. And I think that's an interesting observation, is how many times have we seen a coach that they throw, and then they get questioned week after week, and then one game they go out and run the ball, and then we see them go right back to their old habits. That is something that Sirianni, I think, deserves a lot of credit for, is the ability to notice that they have done something well and stuck with it. I mean, that to me is what stands out about Nick Sirianni, is the ability to adapt and then sticking with what he adapted with, too.
Yeah, interesting observation. Obviously, it would have been easy for him to go away from the run after dominating the Detroit Lions and going back to the pass-happy offense. But obviously, you saw the recipe. You saw that was a potential blueprint for success, and it unlocked a lot of different things on offense. And you got to give your credit to Nick Sirianni for sticking with it and being able to ride that out. And you're seeing a much more cohesive and rhythmic offense. Like I said, you're playing meaningful football with 2 games left. So, I mean, that's about all you can ask for, given how the early part of the season really unfolded.
Okay, with that, running the ball, what's that going to look like this week against Washington? We know Miles Sanders out. One guy was limited. That was Jordan Howard today on the Eagles injury report. He was the only guy listed. That stinger, to me, is worrisome because he had a stinger a couple of years ago. We didn't see him for about 4 or 5 weeks after that stinger. So maybe he plays, maybe he doesn't. What's the run game look like with no Miles Sanders?
Well, you said it. Maybe Jordan Howard plays, maybe he doesn't. They said that this stinger is different from the one that really kept him out and lingered week after week in 2019. It was sort of a little bit of a mystery. But I think that when you look at no Miles Sanders, what does that mean? So you're going to see Boston Scott take on another elevated role in December, which he did in 2019. If you remember, he ripped off a remarkable 4-week stretch, a couple of them going against the Giants. And you're going to see Boston Scott really head the unit if Jordan Howard's unable to play. And then you're going to see some Kenny Gainwell, although I don't think he's going to factor as prominently as some may assume. I think he's still going to be a situational change-up guy who's going to factor prominently in the receiving game. But I think you're going to see them really lean heavily on Boston Scott. There's a lot of trust there with Boston Scott. You see them willing to implement him into the offense when they get in the goal line situations. Overall, he protects the football well. He doesn't do a whole lot of dancing or anything crazy at the line of scrimmage. He just goes straight ahead, and he has a good low center of gravity, and I think that he sort of gets lost in the shuffle there. Plays with good pad level and leverage, so he's a good runner in that short area of the short yardage situation. So I think there's a good trust level there with him.
You know, Andrew, every time Boston Scott kind of gets called to be leaned on more, he seems to answer the call. So why isn't he a guy that gets more of an opportunity other than when he's absolutely, it's like break glass if needed? Here's Boston Scott. Why do you think he's not more a part of the offense in other situations?
Well, I think that Jordan Howard and Miles Sanders are better players. They're more well-rounded. They're better suited to handle a lion's share of carries. I think Boston Scott's the type of player, I sort of equate him to Alex Singleton on defense, where they can step in and give you productive stretches for a stretch. They're not meant to be 16, 17 game starters. I think that sort of really limits their effectiveness and overall explosiveness and things that they do well. I think that they would tend to wear down in that regard. But he's more of a specialty type player, but one that can sort of handle volume, Boston Scott, and we've seen that. But I think over the course of the season, Jordan Howard and Miles Sanders are just better options. Kenny Gainwell offers a little bit more as a receiver, so there's just guys in front of him that he simply wasn't going to leapfrog.
Andrew DiCecco, football at 4. The Eagles play a Washington team that the last we saw them, 56-14. They got blasted by Dallas. We saw infighting, between members of the football team. Do you look at that as, hey, 1 week, they had a bad day, the game got away from them, boiled over? Or do you look at a team that has kind of packed it in and, that's basically, playing out the string here?
Well, I think if this year's version of the NFL has shown you anything, that it's a very much a week-to-week league, and it wouldn't surprise me if you see a vastly different Washington football team this week than you saw that got gashed on Sunday night. But that said, the Eagles are a better football team. They have the momentum on their side, and they need to come out and they need to play a complete game, right? They can't go out and have a lackluster first quarter, first half like they did against the Giants. They got to play a full 60 minutes if they want to beat this team, because they do have some competent components there on offense that could really cause some problems. But I think it'll be a little bit more competitive than what last week's game from Washington may indicate.
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago when they played Washington, we tried to, really look at the matchups as we like to do on the Thursday with you, Andrew. You give us such good breakdowns of some of the matchups. We couldn't do that because we didn't know who was going to play. That game ended up getting moved to Tuesday night, and obviously Philadelphia ended up winning that game. Washington is going to be a little different this time. Let's start at quarterback, because last time you saw Garrett Gilbert, who basically was there for 72 hours. What does Taylor Heinicke offer to their offense that maybe Gilbert didn't bring that night?
Well, listen, Garrett Gilbert was thrust into a really difficult situation. I don't envy what he had to go up against. But, Taylor Heinicke, he has a firm grasp of the offense. I think he's more of a game manager. He can make the throws really over, the short to intermediate areas. He doesn't have a big arm. He's not going to push the ball down the field. But he does have a decent rapport with his supporting cast and Terry McLaurin and Ricky Seals-Jones. He threw a really nice touchdown to Ricky Seals-Jones earlier in the season in the corner of the end zone. And the running game. Antonio Gibson, I think he's going to factor in the receiving game as well. I just think that he's not going to throw. He's likely not going to throw for 300 yards. He's more of a 225, 250, and he can also run the ball, create yards with his legs as well. So he gives them a different dimension, far more than certainly what Garrett Gilbert gave them just a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah. Now we also saw the last time they played is you kind of look at Gilbert. It was very limited. Taylor Heinicke. They also mentioned that Kyle Allen might get some playing time here. So you wonder what their mindset is kind of going into this game. Are they going to try to, shuffle the quarterbacks around? Gibson's got the injury. We don't know if he's really going to play. But the big guy, is McLaurin, and you wonder how he factors in with all the quarterback shuffles here. I guess this kind of limits his effectiveness if he's got a different quarterback playing each week.
Yeah, and he's the X factor this week.
Right.
How is he going to respond? Right. he didn't do anything with Garrett Gilbert. He really hadn't done much a couple of weeks prior with Taylor Heinicke either. He's not a DeAndre Hopkins yet. He's not someone that's quarterback proof. DeAndre Hopkins has performed no matter who has been back there, even dating back to his days with the Houston Texans. I don't think we're quite there yet with with Terry McLaurin. So I don't know how effective the passing game is going to be for Washington. I would expect to see them Adam Humphries factor prominently. I would expect to see Ricky Seals-Jones, and even if Gibson can't play or he's limited, Jarrett Patterson is a really good find for them. Undrafted free agent from Buffalo, very productive college player. He can he's sort of built similar to not Darren Sproles, Boston Scott, a little bit thicker, shorter guy, stout. And I think that, either way, I think they're going to have to lean on the running game this week and see what they can do.
Yeah, and we know that last time you mentioned, the offense, Gilbert was running that offense. Philly's defense, Derek Barnett, I don't know, has he been pulled off the COVID list yet? If he doesn't play, if he's unable to go, that's one area where they lack a little bit of depth. Is if, I know Barnett is very frustrating at times, but if he's not there, how's that defensive end position kind of materialized this season? We saw Milton Williams. We've seen some interesting names pop in at that spot.
Yeah, I mean, you certainly would see Milton Williams. You'd also see Teron Jackson, who was activated. Ryan Kerrigan was also activated, although he hasn't really given you much. You'd see a rotation of guys. I would expect to see Milton Williams see a little bit more snaps there than normal. Teron Jackson's a player that's sort of flashed and come on a little bit here late in the season. We'd like to see what he can do with a little bit more of an uptick in usage. Derek Barnett really, frankly, has not given you much anyway. So I think you might see more of a platoon and shuffling with, a number like 4 different defensive ends there.
On the Eagle offensive side of the ball, they like to run the ball. That's probably, what we're going to see a lot of again. The last time they played Washington, able to do so. I want to get your take, though, on how the run game changes with Hurts not running as much. I don't know if his ankle's still bothering him, but we only saw him run twice last week. He barely did anything the week before. Does the running game, is it different because Hurts is not as big a part of it?
I don't think it's so much as that as it is that you have a different. You're down to your third or fourth running back here this week. I think teams still have to respect the fact that Hurts has that ability and can pull it and run at any given moment. And we don't know what the reasoning is behind it. We don't know if it's the ankle. We don't know if it's just a different approach. If he's seeing things differently. If if he's just sort of taking the next step in his progression. We don't really know what the case may be, but teams will absolutely have to still worry about his running ability. So I think that it doesn't change it so much in that regard as it will how will the running game look with Boston Scott, Kenny Gainwell, and potentially a limited Jordan Howard this week.
Yeah, because, right now, obviously Philly's fighting to try to get into a playoff spot. They've got the 7th spot currently. And if they win this week, it's going to look pretty good for them to get in. But if you want to make a little bit of noise, don't you have to have that element of Hurts's game? Doesn't he have to be a bigger part of the running game?
Yeah, you need Hurts to be able to be firing on all cylinders, especially the running game, because he presents that's such a difficult element to plan against. And you could have everything covered up perfectly, but you have to account for his athleticism and ability to create on his own. And I think that's what makes him such a dangerous player. And I also think that you got to get Miles Sanders and Jordan Howard healthy, because that's the thunder and lightning that they complement each other quite well. And what they're able to do really translates well to these colder months, to playoff time. And the Eagles are going to want to get those guys healthy as quickly as possible, because I think that is a huge detriment to the offense, even more so than Hurts is not being as apt to run the football in the past couple weeks.
Philly obviously takes on the Washington football team. You can hear the game right here on 97.3 ESPN, Football at 4. Andrew DiCecco kind of breaking down the matchup here. I know you like to give out X factors in all the games. What are some of the things that you're looking at in this one? Because, I think a lot of people, as we kind of hinted at earlier, look at what happened in Dallas last week and just figure, okay, they've mailed it in. To me, the X factor is, don't overlook this Washington football team and just think that because a couple guys got into a fight and they got blown out last week, that means that they've nailed it in. What are some of the things that you're going to be paying attention to?
What am I going to be paying attention to? I want to see how their defensive line is able to capitalize against a porous Washington offensive line. the Eagles defensive line has really cashed in on lackluster offensive lines. And I think that if they're able to get to Taylor Heineke early, that could cause some mistakes, turn the tides there, and you might see them get out to an earlier lead. That's really what I want to see them continue to dominate on the offensive side of the ball, particularly lean on the offensive line. That's your best unit. It's your strongest unit. Let them impose their will and reset the line of scrimmage and get those guys leaning on the defensive line of Washington and really start to wear on those guys, because they do have the advantage. As good as Washington is on the defensive line, I still think the Eagles have the advantage on the offensive side. So really start to impose your will early and set the tone.
All right, let's talk some numbers here, Andrew. Eagles' top 10 defense in the NFL following the game against the Giants. They ranked top 10 in yards per game, rushing yards per game, passing yards per game, 3-and-out percentage, defensive touchdowns, and some other categories. Top 10 defense, you feeling that, or fool's gold?
I think it's a little too early to call it a top 10 defense or really know what you have in that unit, or have they turned the corner, because they won't really know that until they play someone like a Dak Prescott the following week, right? I mean, it's easy for the defense to turn it loose and look competent and even dominant at times over, the Taylor Heinekes and the Jake Fromms and, Zach Wilson, all these guys. But we really have to see how they fare against some of the more upper echelon quarterbacks who earlier in the season were just dissecting them in the short to intermediate areas of the field, 80% completion percentage. I mean, that's what's really going to be the telltale. How do they fare against the Dak Prescotts, or if they get to the wild card round, how are they going to go against them? And that's really what we'll be able to see. Have they turned the corner? Do they have something in Jonathan Gannon? Has Jonathan Gannon sort of really found his footing as a coordinator and really adapting to his personnel?
Yeah, we saw reports this week that he was a name to keep an eye on in the head coaching search. And I know a lot of Eagles fans out there are almost like, get rid of him, take him. Who would want this guy as a head coach? But I think it kind of shows you what teams around this league have really respected the job that he has been able to do with this team. I guess that maybe they don't think it's just because the caliber of quarterback as to why this Eagles defense has made some of the adjustments and changes.
Yeah, who really knows what it is? I mean, we can make assumptions and here and there, but I think the fact of the matter is, 3/4 of a season doesn't change the perception of what teams are going to think about a young coach like a Jonathan Gannon. He's going to get he deserves another year anyway, but I think that he was a hot commodity before the season. And I really don't think that flame is sort of burnt already on Jonathan Gannon. I think he's still very much at the forefront here and going to be a coach that a lot of teams are going to be willing to look at when they're looking at retooling their head coaching position. I think that he does have some promise, and I think the fact that you're seeing him adapt and really learn on the job, it's very enticing when you're a team looking for a potential new head coach.
All right, 10-2, that's the number. The Eagles, since 2016, they are 10-2 in December and January regular season games. So far, they are 3-0 in this December season. Andrew, will they get to 4-0? Will they beat the Washington football team on Sunday?
Yeah, I think they do. I think they beat Washington on Sunday, and I think it'll be a little bit more of a fight. They're going to put up more of a fight than the Giants certainly did. But I imagine they'll start to pull away late in the third quarter, one of those type of games.
All right, there you go, Andrew, and Football at 4 in the books for 2021. It's our final Football at 4 for the calendar year 2021. Every day, 4 o'clock, we talk football, 365 all year with the guys from InsideTheBirds.com and the Inside the Birds podcast. Make sure you check those guys out over at InsideTheBirds.com, the Inside the Birds podcast. And, of course, DiCecco NFL is where you can get him on Twitter, as a lot of previews and insights to get you ready for the Eagles and the Washington football team right here on 97.3 ESPN. Happy New Year to you, Andrew. And when we talk to you next, it'll be 2022, my man.
Happy New Year, and I'll talk to you guys next year in 2022.
2022, it will be. All right, there he is, Andrew DiCecco from InsideTheBirds.com. Those guys do a fantastic job. It's a great partnership that we get to talk football every day with the Inside the Birds crew right here on the Sports Bash.